than 50 years, Sesame Street has been a beloved feature on PBS, and the show gets some of its funding from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. But President Trump has now signed legislation that cuts federal funding for public broadcasting, and as a result, the CPB says it is shutting down. What impact, if any, will that have on PBS and Sesame Street? LA Times senior entertainment reporter Meg James was here to tell us. Hey, Meg, great to see you.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me.
Tell everybody about the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a little bit of the history and what it does.
So the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is the financing arm, the funding arm that allocates all the money for this 1,500 radio and public television stations across the country. So while the Corporation for Public Broadcasting isn't actually in the programming, they do finance shows like Sesame Street.
My friend the Snowflake, Mr. Snuffy.
Like PBS NewsHour, they do steer the funding. So they came into being in 1967. That law was signed into law by then President Lyndon Johnson, and they've provided funding for these stations ever since.
And conservatives, and particularly Donald Trump, have taken aim at them for years.
For years, even back in President Reagan's administration, there was, complaints that NPR specifically was too liberal. And Donald Trump and a lot of conservatives in Congress picked up that sort of banner. They tried several times before to repeal the funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, but just in July they succeeded as part of what they would call a rescission package, which actually took away money that over $1 billion that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting had already been told it was going to receive.
This is a devastating blow, is it not?
It is. This really, for a lot of stations, including stations here in Los Angeles, they have a small percentage of their budget comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. But for many smaller stations across the country, and I reached out to several when I was preparing this article, it is really going to be difficult for them to sustain newsrooms without this funding.
I don't think people realize what a lifeline these tiny little stations are. And I'm talking about Shasta, California, or Redding, California, or, in a little town in Florida, or a little town in South Carolina where they have floods, Florida where they have hurricanes. Again, Northern California where we have these wildfires. These places are lifelines, not just places to watch Sesame Street.
Oh, yes, and that's one of the things that even Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski, who represents the state of Alaska, she tried to salvage the funding for the public broadcasting. It didn't work, but she pointed out how stations in particularly rural areas of Alaska where they have tsunami alerts really depend on these local stations because they are lifelines for these smaller communities, particularly when you have like a weather emergency. One of the stations I reached out to last week was Billings, Montana, and they received 13% of their budget through the CPB funding. And so they're now wrestling with, can they even have a newsroom that covers a huge swath of area from northern Wyoming to the Canadian border. So it's really quite devastating, particularly for the smaller stations and also for the larger ones like here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, so what's going to happen to PBS SoCal?
That's a good question. They're going to lose about $4 million in funding that they had already planned on. They told me last week that they're getting, increased interest in donations, but over time it might not come close to providing what the CPD had been consistently providing, which is this regular funding that helped them sustain their operations.
Yeah, and what about KCRW and LAist, our NPR stations?
Yeah, these newsrooms also rely on this funding, not to the extent of some of the smaller stations, but KCRW is set to lose $1.3 million just for this current cycle. And LAist KPCC 89.3 is going to lose nearly $2 million. So this is real money. KPCC, LAist had said earlier that this might, force them to cut like 13 journalist positions, which is big because they have a vibrant newsroom here in the Southland.
Yeah, another blow to journalism this year. Been a tough one. Thank you so much, Meg James.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me.
Thank you for watching our YouTube channel. For more stories in your communities, click the subscribe button right here. You can also download our app or watch us on TV for the latest information, balanced coverage, weather updates every 10 minutes, and more. We'll see you then.